I first heard about the Long Hollow mine through a late-night conversation in a dingy bar just outside Beckley. "It's haunted," the bartender had said, sliding me a glass of cheap whiskey. "Tapping sounds deep in the shafts. Jacob's still down there, you know." His tone was casual, but his words clung to me like smoke. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing at the mouth of the mine. Its jagged maw a stark contrast to the beauty of the Appalachian Mountains surrounding it. Rusted machinery lay discarded, overtaken by ivy and wildflowers. The air was heavy, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something metallic like blood. I had come prepared: flashlights, rope, a camera, and a small handheld recorder. As an environmental activist, I was used to investigating sites like this, documenting the scars left behind by corporations that had abandoned their responsibilities along with the land. But the stories about Jacob intrigued me. If there was any truth to them, perhaps his voice could amplify my cause. The first hour inside was uneventful, save for the oppressive silence that seemed to swallow every sound. The tunnels branched like veins, some collapsing into rubble, others disappearing into suffocating darkness. My flashlight flickered, casting fleeting shadows that danced along the walls. I could almost imagine figures lurking just beyond the beam. Then I heard it, the tapping. It was faint at first, an irregular rhythm that echoed through the tunnels. I froze, straining to pinpoint its source. My mind raced with possibilities. Falling rocks, the wind, perhaps an animal. But the pattern was deliberate, almost human. "Hello?" My voice sounded small against the cavernous void. The tapping stopped. I shivered, suddenly hyper-aware of how deep I was, how much earth loomed above me. The silence pressed in, thicker than before, until it was broken by a faint whisper. "Claire." My heart leapt into my throat. The voice was distant yet unmistakable, carried on the still air like a plea. I swung my flashlight around, the beam shaking as my hands trembled. "Who's there?" The tapping resumed, faster this time, leading deeper into the mine. Against my better judgment, I followed, each step crunching on loose gravel. My breath came shallow, the air growing thinner, colder. The voice came again, closer now. "Help me." I rounded a corner and saw him, Jacob. He was a spectral figure, translucent and tinged with the gray of cold dust. His face bore the weary lines of a life spent underground, and his eyes held a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight. He stood beside a collapsed shaft, the rubble framing him like a grave. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice as hollow as the mine. "I could say the same to you. I managed, though my knees threatened to buckle." His expression softened. "I need your help. They buried the truth here, along with us." "Buried what?" "A logbook," he said, gesturing to the rubble. "It proves they knew the supports were failing, knew we were doomed, but they kept us working." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. The stories of corporate negligence weren't new to me, but this was different. This was personal. If I find it, what then? "You show them," Jacob said, his form flickering like a dying flame. "Show the world what they did." I hesitated. The shaft looked unstable, the rubble precarious. One wrong move, and I could end up like him. But the resolve in his eyes steadied me. "Okay, I'll do it." It took hours of careful digging, my muscles straining and my nerves fraying with every creak of shifting rock. Jacob watched silently, his presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Finally, I unearthed a rusted metal box, its hinges stiff with age. Inside was a logbook, its pages yellowed but legible. Jacob's voice broke the silence. "Thank you." When I looked up, he was gone. The trek out of the mine was harrowing. The walls seemed to close in, the air heavier than before. Every step felt like a challenge, as if the mine itself resented my escape. But I emerged into the sunlight, clutching the logbook like a lifeline. The exposé took weeks to compile. I scanned every page, documenting the damning evidence. Warnings ignored, corners cut, lives sacrificed for profit. I released it online, the story spreading like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, and the outcry was immediate. The mining company faced lawsuits, their reputation shattered. A month later, I returned to Long Hollow for the dedication of a memorial erected in honor of the lost miners. Their names were etched into a stone monument, a solemn reminder of their sacrifice. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, I lingered, placing a hand on the cold stone. "Jacob," I whispered, "I hope you're at peace now." For a moment, the air felt lighter, a gentle breeze rustling the nearby trees. And then, faintly, I heard a single tap like a thank you. The ghosts along Hollow Mine had found their voice, and the world was finally listening. I should have listened when they warned me about the Whispering Woods, but the thrill of mystery always outweighed caution in my book. The stories about hikers vanishing without a trace, the eerie whispers at night, and the strange sightings. It was all too good to pass up. I wasn't scared, I was curious. That's how I found myself standing at the edge of the infamous forest one chilly autumn afternoon. The towering trees formed an almost impenetrable wall of shadows, their gnarled branches twisted like skeletal fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, and despite the sun still hanging in the sky, the woods seemed unnaturally dark. I had packed a flashlight, a map, and my journal to document the adventure, but as I stepped deeper into the forest, the weight of silence pressed down on me. No birds chirped, no leaves rustled. It was a kind of quiet that made your skin crawl, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The first whispers came as dusk fell. At first, they were faint, indistinct murmurs just out of earshot. I stopped in my tracks, spinning around to pinpoint their source. But the woods were empty. The whispers grew louder, overlapping and echoing, as if dozens of voices were calling out from the shadows. "Jake!" I froze. My name, spoken in a soft, lilting voice, sent a chill down my spine. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe I was hearing things. But the sound of my name repeated, this time from a different direction. Then I saw it, the cabin. It was old and decrepit, its wooden frames sagging under the weight of time. Ivy crept up its walls, and the windows were smudged with grime. Against my better judgment, I approached it, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The door creaked open as I pushed it, revealing an interior covered in dust and cobwebs. The cabin reeked of abandonment, but it also felt occupied. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. My flashlight beam landed on a small table, where a stack of old photographs lay scattered. Picking one up, I saw a smiling family, a man, a woman, and a little girl with wide, curious eyes. The back of the photo was dated 1968. As I flipped through the pictures, I caught movement in the window. My heart skipped. I turned sharply, my flashlight trembling, and saw her, a girl no older than 10. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her hollow eyes bored into mine. "Help me," she whispered. Her voice was soft but carried an urgency that froze me in place. She drifted closer, her form flickering like an old film reel. "My name is Lily," she said. I died here." Her words struck me like a blow. She pointed to one of the photographs on the table. "That's me. We came here to camp. But he found us." "Who?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her eyes darkened. "The man who killed us." Lily's story poured out in broken fragments. A man had lured her family to the cabin under the guise of helping them when their car broke down. He turned out to be a monster, a serial killer who had hunted families in these woods for years. Her body, she said, was buried nearby, her soul unable to rest until justice was served. I wanted to leave, to run as fast as my legs would carry me, but something in her gaze held me rooted to the spot. "You can help me," she pleaded. "Please." How could I say no? The next few days were a blur of frantic research. I combed through old police reports and newspaper clippings at the local library. The deeper I dug, the more horrifying the story became. Several families had gone missing in the area between 1965 and 1970, their cases unsolved. Witness accounts mentioned a man seen driving a rusted truck, but no one had been able to identify him. Then I found it, a faded police report naming a suspect, Robert Grayson. He'd been questioned but released due to lack of evidence. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I read the details. Grayson still lived in a small house just outside the woods. The next evening, I found myself at his doorstep. The house was eerily quiet, and my knock echoed in the stillness. The door creaked open, and an older man with sunken eyes and a sour expression stared back at me. "What do you want?" he barked. I hesitated, then held up one of the photographs I'd taken from the cabin. "Do you remember this girl?" "Lily." His face paled, and his hand gripped the doorframe. "I don't know what you're talking about. Get off my property." Before I could respond, a cold gust swept past me, and the room behind him grew darker. Lily appeared, her ghostly form now more vivid, her eyes blazing with fury. "You remember me," she hissed, her voice no longer soft but sharp and accusing. "You killed us." Grayson staggered back, his face contorted in terror. No, I didn't mean to." Lily stepped closer, her presence forcing him to his knees. "Confess," she demanded. Tears streamed down his face as he broke down, mumbling confession of how he had lured her family to the woods, how he had killed them and buried their bodies. As his words spilled out, the air grew heavier, crackling with an unseen energy. Lily's face softened, and she turned to me, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her form beginning to fade. "You set me free." When she disappeared, the oppressive weight lifted from the woods. Grayson was arrested soon after, his crimes finally exposed. But even as I stood at the edge of the forest, staring into its now silent depths, I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered. The woods no longer whispered, but they watched, and I knew I'd never be the same again.